Is China's Belt and Road Initiative a debt trap for developing countries? That's the question we're looking to answer today. The Belt and Road Initiative, often simply referred to as BRI, is a global development strategy adopted by the Chinese government involving infrastructure development and investments in nearly 70 countries and international organizations. China owed more than $1 tn in BRI. Before we dive in details, please subscribe to the channel and stay always one step ahead to know all global important events happening around you. Give a thumbs up and share the video with your family and friends. Let's move on with the video. China is owed more than $1 trillion through its Belt and Road project, making it the biggest debt collector in the world, a report said this week, with an estimated 80% of the loans supporting countries in financial distress. Beijing says upwards of 150 countries, stretching from Uruguay to Sri Lanka, have signed up to the BRI, a vast global infrastructure push unveiled by President Xi Jinping a decade ago. The first decade of the initiative saw China distribute huge loans to fund the construction of bridges, ports, and highways in low- and middle-income countries. But much more than half of those loans have now entered their principal repayment period, said a report released Monday by AidData, a research institute tracking development finance at Virginia's College of William and Mary. That figure is set to hit 75% by the end of the decade, it added. Crunching data compiled on Chinese financing of almost 21,000 projects across 165 countries, AidData said Beijing had now committed aid and credit hovering around $80 billion a year to low- and middle-income nations. The United States, in contrast, has provided $60 billion to such countries a year. Beijing is navigating an unfamiliar and uncomfortable role as the world's largest official debt collector, the report said. Total outstanding debt, including principal but excluding interest, from borrowers in the developing world to China is at least $1.1 trillion, AidData said. AidData, it added, estimates that 80% of China's overseas lending portfolio in the developing world is currently supporting countries in financial distress. Proponents of the BRI praise it for bringing resources and economic growth to the global south. But critics have long pointed to opaque pricing for projects built by Chinese companies, with countries including Malaysia and Myanmar renegotiating deals to bring down costs. And AidData said China has in recent years suffered reputational damage among developing countries, with its approval rating falling from 56% in 2019 to 40% in 2021. But China is learning from its mistakes and becoming an increasingly adept crisis manager, the study said. Beijing is seeking to de-risk the BRI by bringing its lending practices more in line with international standards, it stressed. But also among those methods are increasingly stringent safeguards to shield itself from the risk of not being repaid, it said. Another notable example of a country caught in China's debt trap is Sri Lanka. That includes allowing key BRI lenders to pay themselves principal and interest due by unilaterally sweeping borrowers' foreign currency reserves held in escrow. These cash seizures are mostly being executed in secret and outside the immediate reach of domestic oversight institutions in low- and middle-income countries, it said. The ability to access cash collateral without borrower consent has become a particularly important safeguard in China's bilateral lending portfolio. At a major summit in Beijing last month marking the project's 10th anniversary, Xi said China would inject more than $100 billion of new funds into the BRI. But a joint report this year by the World Bank and other institutions, including AidData, said Beijing had been forced to hand out billions of dollars in bailout loans to BRI countries in recent years. The initiative has also drawn scrutiny for its massive carbon footprint and the environmental degradation caused by massive infrastructure projects. Also, the Hambantota port deal, as in Sri Lanka, is an example of China's debt trap, and it has also raised eyebrows among international observers who point out that it provides China with a strategic advantage. The port's location on the Indian Ocean's major shipping routes makes it a significant asset for China, giving it an edge in maritime trade and potentially military advantage as well. The case of Sri Lanka is a sobering example of the potential pitfalls of the Belt and Road Initiative. It illustrates the risks of excessive borrowing and the potential consequences when countries are unable to repay their debts. This case serves as a stark warning about the risks of excessive borrowing from China. In the face of China's debt trap diplomacy, India presents an alternative. Let's talk about India's digital payments infrastructure, known as the Unified Payments Interface, or UPI for short. This is being increasingly recognized as a cost-efficient counterpoint to China's Belt and Road Initiative. A shining example of this is Nepal's recent decision to deploy India's payments model, making it the first country outside of India to fully embrace UPI. This open set of specifications allows for real-time money transfers, a critical component in today's fast-paced digital economy. In India alone, UPI handled billions of transactions, amounting to a whopping $940 billion in 2021. But it's not just about the sheer volume of transactions. The adoption of UPI by Nepal and potentially other countries could lead to a revolution in driving down cross-border remittance fees. This means more money in the pockets of individuals and businesses conducting international transactions, thus stimulating economic growth. However, let's not overlook the challenges. Replicating India's success with UPI requires governments to accept UPI-like systems as a public good and ensure data security. This is no small feat, and it will take a concerted effort from all stakeholders. Yet, despite these hurdles, India's digital infrastructure is building useful bridges. It's offering mutually beneficial returns for India and other countries alike, promoting trade and fostering economic resilience. While India's approach presents its own set of challenges, it represents a potential alternative to China's BRI. It's an alternative that's rooted in digital innovation, economic inclusivity, and most importantly, in the autonomy of nations, free from the shackles of overwhelming debt. China's Belt and Road Initiative presents both opportunities and challenges for developing countries. As we've explored, this ambitious project has the potential to bring significant infrastructure development and economic growth to countries in need. However, it also carries the risk of those countries falling into a debt trap, a situation that can have severe long-term consequences. Take Kenya, for example. This African nation has relied heavily on Chinese loans for infrastructure development. While this has led to significant growth and modernization, there's been criticism over the rising debt levels. The need to repay these loans could potentially strangle the country's economy in the future, leaving it in a precarious position. And then there's Sri Lanka, a country where the debt trap scenario has already played out. Unable to repay its Chinese loans, Sri Lanka was forced to hand over a strategic port to China on a 99-year lease. This situation underscores the potential geopolitical implications of the Belt and Road Initiative, raising questions about China's intentions and the sovereignty of the debtor nations. However, it's not all doom and gloom. As we've seen, India's digital payments infrastructure presents a viable alternative to China's Belt and Road Initiative. By adopting this cost-efficient model, countries like Nepal are able to foster economic growth without the risk of falling into a debt trap. So what's the takeaway here? It's crucial for countries involved in the Belt and Road Initiative to carefully consider their involvement and explore alternatives where possible. They must weigh the immediate benefits of infrastructure development and economic growth against the potential long-term consequences of unsustainable debt. It's clear that the implications of China's Belt and Road Initiative are far-reaching and complex. Only time will tell what the ultimate impact will be for the countries involved.